to go. So welcome to the session about the women in the built environment. We are very happy to have you all here. I thought I would just start off with a very introductory slide about, you'll recognize it, Sydney, right? And the built-up environment in Sydney. And our topic today, women in the built environment. And as you can see, the magic happening there. We believe there's space for women in this industry to really come make the magic happen. And that is what we want to discuss today. So before we start, if I can just do some acknowledgements of our country, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation upon which our ancestral lands of our city campus now stands. Would also like to pay the respects to the elders, both past and present, acknowledging them as the traditional custodians of knowledge for this land. Then just some housekeeping. We are recording this session, and I assume everybody attending have been in various sessions today, so you would know this by now. But we will only record audio and screen share, so we will not be recording any video input from you. But if you do not wish to be involved, just read that bottom part. You can please send an email to marketingprivacy@UTS to discuss the options with them. And then just another housekeeping. If you want to ask any questions, please go ahead into the Q&A box below, and we will attend to that in due course. Right, so let's start off our campus, as you can see there. But today I've got the privilege to be accompanied by 5 remarkable ladies in our industry, and they will all have an opportunity to introduce themselves briefly. So before I get to introduce them to you, I thought I would start off just by saying who I am. So I am Yua Silvier. I'm the head of School of Built Environment, but I'm also a professional urban planner from, that's what I studied. And I'm also currently the chair of the Women in Planning Network for the Commonwealth Association of Planners. So we do a lot of things for women in planning, women in the built environment. So therefore it's my passion, and I'm very glad to share this session with you. I just inserted there a web link to the Women in Planning Network of the Commonwealth Association. If you're interested, you can just go search for that on Google, you'll find it. And then just in a nutshell, why I think, women in planning, women in the built environment are very needed. I think if we would take a photo of, or if you would ask anybody to draw a picture of Earth, we always get this image, like this very idealist, happy place. But in reality, we see something different. We see a built environment that's full of challenges, and we need to change this. We need to acknowledge our role in it. So there's a quote that I love to also share with the students. It says, whatever you are not changing, you are choosing. All right, so we are all in this to make our built environment a better place, to make our future a better place. And there's definitely room for females within this reality. Sorry, go on that. In terms of planning, according to me, I think there's an immense opportunity for women in planning, urban planning, city planning, to create the future that we envision. So things like sustainable cities and safe environments, child-friendly spaces, and livable futures definitely need the input of this female voice. And likewise, I can share with you some quotes that my colleagues in the School for Built Environment shared with us. So the same thing for women in project management. Professor Kathy Killen said, women excel in project management careers, and leading projects enables women to combine their interpersonal, technical, and organizational skills to bring about positive change across the industry. And then also we had Professor Sarah Wilkinson give us a quote. Sarah is a professor in property, and she's been part of various projects. The one that I liked best was she named it Let's Twist. So let's train women in science, construction, and technology. So there's a lot of work being done in this space to support our young females to enter the working area and the environment, the built environment in their professional capacity. Another quote from Arazu. She is our course director for construction project management. And she said, women's equal participation in decision and policy making in construction and related industries is crucial for environmental and social justice in communities, codes, and standards. So all of these ladies, our female colleagues, recognizing their place in industry and why it's so important for us to encourage the younger generation to become part of this, to really get that female voice into the built environment. So before I introduce to you the rest of our panel, if you want more information about any of the courses in the built environment, you are welcome to go to the chat. I assume you have been in some of the sessions earlier, but please feel free, reach out to us and we will definitely support you for more course-specific information. And then straight over to our panel. So I would briefly just say their names and then give each of them an opportunity to speak. Before they speak, I will read a short bio of them. So we welcome April McCabe. April is from the Planning Institute of Australia. We've got Belinda Bentley. Belinda is founding director of Nine Springs and also a UTS graduate. Then we've got Stephanie Nguyen, president of the UTS Built Environment Association. And we've got Kimberly Tran. Kimberly is currently a UTS student in construction project management, and same with Catherine Fatuo, also current UTS student. So I will now just stop to share my screen so you can see everybody on your screen. And firstly, I would like to introduce then officially April McCabe. So April is an experienced urban planner and a policy specialist with 20 years experience working in politics, government and the private sector in Australia, the UK and Ireland. April is the Associate Director Planning and Strategy at Cred Consulting, working on a variety of urban planning, social and cultural planning, and city and community research projects. April is passionate about local activism, gender equality, and the advancement of women in the built environment. And she actually got a very long CV, but I think the core for today is she's the co-chair of the Planning Institute of Australia's New South Wales Women in Planning Network. April, it's a privilege to have you join us. So I will give over to you to share why do you think it's important for us to see more women in planning?
Thank you so much, and thanks for the invitation. You know, I'm really privileged here to represent the Planning Institute of Australia. As you heard, I am probably further away from university than some of the other panelists on our call, but you know, for me, you know, the foundation of great cities is a diversity of people, interests, ideas, and activities. And we as planners, you know, I see our role as the custodians of our cities and places. You know, we are an intersection between the different built environment professions as well. And importantly, you know, where there's a voice in government, there's a voice in private as well. And we've got to make sure that we're balancing the public interest with development interest as well. Because at the end of the day, most planners that I've had the pleasure to work with over the years is we are all looking to make the places and the cities that we're working in better for the people that live there, work there, that visit. I think the really interesting, and to answer your question, you know, why I think it's important, you know, women have an important place in planning, and why it's important to, I suppose, get more women coming into planning is that I think cities and towns have traditionally not been planned to suit the lives of women. And I think a really big part of that is because the voices in decision-making have mainly been men. And importantly, they have mainly been middle-aged men. And I think that there's recently been a lot of discussion, not in planning in cities, but I think in terms of women and the voice of women. And really there is this drive at the moment for women to amplify their voice, and we're talking about being part of decision making, because actually that's, for me, one of the most important things. I think sometimes in planning and city design, we talk about women and safety and its lights and pram ramps. But I think going back to the idea of what a foundation of great city is, women are not this homogenous group that we plan for. Women are this beautiful sort of diverse group that offer so much. And I think that having that gender lens and applying that gender lens to planning of our towns and places, you know, what that does, it provides those variations and those nuances that we need within our cities. So so all these different experiences can happen. That people can make cities their own. They can respond to not only the diversity of women, but the diversity of our communities. You know, we want our cities to reflect the diversity and the generosity that our communities have. My first degree was in geography. I'm a social scientist, and David Harvey is one of my favorite kind of researchers in the politics of public space. And there's a great quote that I always use when I'm talking to students and other people, and it talks about one of the most important but underused human rights is that to remake a city. And I think that we, as all of us on this call, have this amazing privilege, but also really important responsibility to remake our cities, not just for the privileged few or the ones that have the loudest voices, but actually we see with the current situation we all find ourselves, how do we make cities that cater for the most vulnerable and the people who don't have that voice for whatever reason? So I think that that's why, for me, not just being a planner, but I think my background also too, I had the privilege for 4 years of working with the Lord Mayor of Sydney, Clover Moore. And also too, so for me, the voice in politics, because that's part of the decision making. How do we get more young women? How do we get older women? And I think that what we see in planning is also to the loss of women throughout, you know, as they grow through their career, also to how do we get more women in those decision-making positions? How do we get women at the table? And I think that, you know, there's no quick answer. There's no easy answer, but I think we all have to keep striving so that planners, designers, those community decision makers are constantly aiming to create inclusive and equitable places, and not just in our cities, but in our rural and regional areas as well. We need to understand what factors are influencing that role of gender, and how do we as policymakers and planner kind of put ourselves and walk in her shoes to understand what's it like for young women, what's it like for women of colour, what's it like for, you know, women with disability. There's all these different things that we need to try and understand, and from different place to place, you know, what's the connectivity? So for me, that's kind of, you know, it's a really big thing, and I have such a privilege of not only being with some great women on this call today, but also to work with really amazing women in the Women in Planning network that are all really passionate about this. And it's not just in New South Wales. We've got chapters of Women in Planning in Queensland, in Victoria, in South Australia, and in WA, and we're working together all together on what is a really big issue, and one we have to keep talking about, because we'll always have our critics, but sometimes the best ideas and the best changes come from those brave souls that are willing to sort of step up and sort of fight the good fight, I suppose. So that's kind of my intro.
Great. I would like to emphasize the point you raised about retention of women in the planning profession. So it's not about only getting women into the profession, it's about keeping women in the profession up until the point where women are also influencing the decision making. And the retention of women in the built environment is actually something that the UTS is also actively researching at the moment, and working with industry to see how can we enable this. You know, what is the challenges currently there for women? Why do they at a certain age maybe, you know, step out of the roles? How can we help them to stay in the roles all the way right up? So I think that's a very important point you raised, along with all the other. I can see you're very passionate, and it's great to have a female colleague that see the same future as that we envision. Next up, I would like to introduce Belinda Bentley. So Belinda is the founding director of Nine Springs, and an independent investment and advisory group specializing in asset and portfolio reviews, property development, community engagement, and client-side project management. Belinda, again, had a very long CV, and I had to choose things to pick out and tell everyone today. The thing I think, Belinda, that you can be very proud of is Belinda is the recipient of both the National, so 2021, and New South Wales 2020 Urban Development Institute of Australia Women in Leadership Award for Excellence. So that's really great to get that kind of recognition from your peers and from your industry. So we are very privileged to have you here, and we'll gladly hear from you about your experience as a female in this built environment.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I would echo April's comments about the white men, mostly middle-aged. When I first started out in my career, I was very much the only woman in the room, and it's really great to see. I think similarly, I've been out of university for quite some time, but I've gone back to university to do a bit of guest lecturing and tutoring with the UTS program, so I may meet some of you over the coming years. But you know, I think for me, it's a lot's changed, and it's because there's so many opportunities for women in the built environment. From, you know, I think even in roles, like I've never just done one thing. Yes, my background is in development management. I specialize more on the front end of development management. So I manage developments when we're going through the strategy, the planning phases, getting approvals. And I think the difference or the opportunities for women in the built environment is that you can have multiple opportunities. You can I work on projects from waste infrastructure to seniors living to residential, like high-end residential to affordable housing. So it's really quite diverse. But prior to starting my own business, I've worked in government, I've worked for a small funds management firm, I've been a retail economist. So the opportunities, I think, is for me, when I first started out, I didn't really fully appreciate the opportunities that were in the built environment. And when I actually graduated from the Master of Property Development program at UTS, and I think I was really trying to find my feet. But similar to April, actually, I studied geography in my undergrad. So I'm a human geographer initially. But I think, like with UTS and the course that I did, it provided me with a network. And I think that's really important as well, is to appreciate that, you know, the industry is so diverse. And so I'm very actively involved with the UDIA. And I'm very grateful for those awards both this year and last year. But I'm also involved with the Urban Land Institute. So they're a global organization, not-for-profit, about land use and built environment real estate. And it makes you realize that the built environment is actually not just focused on Sydney or Australia or New South Wales. It's actually global. So you have opportunities to meet other women, other men that are beyond just Sydney, that are talking, you know, what are the trends in, you know, technology, innovation, you know, housing. I sit on the board of a community housing provider as well. Like, the opportunities are so broad and diverse, and it's really up to yourself to take a step in and try something. And, you know, some things don't work out. Like, you know, for me, being a retail economist wasn't for me, but, you know, I think there's just a really broad range of opportunities that you can go from, you know, just a single degree. And I think as well, similar to April's comments, I think women look at things in a different lens, and the way that we manage meetings, the way that we influence, the way that we manage teams and collaborate, and even our creativity, it's really different. And so for a long time, being the only woman in the room, I felt really shy to speak up because, you know, I'm quite introverted, but I realized that I saw things differently. And I realized that actually I was almost like a fresher breath air because I had a different view. I saw things differently. My mum was also, you know, from Hong Kong. So I culturally see things differently, and having that diversity in the room. So I'm really an advocate for all forms of diversity in our sector to come in, because that's what makes cities, or even regional areas as well. And we need that input, because I've always said, and, you know, what's somewhat disappointing in leadership at the moment is that leadership doesn't really reflect the diversity of the communities that we live and work in. And that's got to change. And that includes your decision makers, your politicians, you know, people at C-suites and all of that. And I think that that's what really is the great opportunity here, is that you can influence outcomes. Where I work on projects where, you know, you see the final built form, you see the final building at the end, and you go, wow, I contributed to that, you know, and I thought about what is that impact to the community, not just the community today, but what does that community look like in the future? So I really feel very fortunate that I'm part of the built environment. And one of the reasons why I do a bit of work with UTS and guest lecture and things like that is because I want to contribute my skills and knowledge back to the future generation, so that you will hopefully do the same thing and pay it forward for the next generation as well. So hopefully that that provides some insight. Thanks.
Great, Belinda, and I think both you and April at this stage can really also say that it's not only us that value the voice of women in the built environment, but it's also industry realizing that we need women in the built environment. And just in terms of careers in the built environment, I think there's ample opportunity for our young females to step into positions.
I think also, yeah, of course. I think one of the big things I'm really passionate about is there's this notion about male champions of change, but I think it's just we need champions of change. It's women and men that need to step up. Everyone kind of laughs when I say this, but it's like we don't just need the men. I need senior women, you know, people above me in there as well, taking care of the women that are coming through, provide them opportunities, identify them and say, you know, this woman needs a promotion, and men. It's not, you know, we don't need to, I think we need to encourage everyone to be inclusive, and that is the way we get better outcomes for our community, for sure.
For sure, and the whole built environment is currently in a boom, and, you know, in a very unique spot where we have lots of decisions to make about the future of the built environment. But just in terms of, you know, industry partners reaching out to us with scholarships for young females, I think there's really a realization that we need the females in these careers and in these positions. So I think it's a very good, you know, discipline to enter. But I would like to hear from our students, you know, about their journey. And the first one I would like to introduce is Stephanie Nguyen. Now, Stephanie is currently in her second year of the Bachelor's Construction Project Management course and a building cadet at Richards Crooks Construction. She's also the co-founder and the president of our Built Environment Association. Now, this is very unique. Stephanie managed to put up this association this year, and they are doing tremendous work for the students, for the student experience, for including students, and just that sense of belonging. So Stephanie is really a champion for our Built Environment Student Association, and she's really eager to lead our younger generations and the professionals in the built environment. So Stephanie, I know some of your energy and passion about the built environment, but specifically in terms of being a female in this environment, how do you feel about it? How's the future?
Yeah, so for me, the topic of being a woman in construction is something very personal to me, because when I first graduated high school many years ago now, which is quite embarrassing, many years ago now, I originally wanted to be in construction, but back then there weren't that many women that I knew of in the construction industry. And coming from an Asian background, it's just not a topic that you talk about, like a woman being in construction. It's just unknown and unheard of. So I felt pressure to take a very conventional route. I studied commerce in accounting, but had I known that the roles and the possibilities of being in construction or being in the built environment for a woman was what I know today, I would have definitely studied. And being one of the few, I mean, I'm the only woman in my delivery team on the site that I'm working on at the moment. And I can hand on heart say that the industry is wanting more women to enter the industry. They are wanting us to be in there. And it's because, like April and Belinda said, we have such a unique way of thinking. Even the energy that we bring to a male-dominated team, it's different, it's refreshing. And me personally, my experience is that, you know, we talk about things, for example, our feelings, our emotions, things that possibly men don't really talk about. And that has been something very different that I see from my team, you know, where now they're speaking more about mental health and being more considerate about, you know, like if you're struggling, talk about it. It's not something to be ashamed of. And it's just something that is, you know, it's such a great time now to be a woman in construction, and the industry wants us, you know. So yeah, it's exciting to see this year, the cohort, there are so many female students in construction. The first year students this year, there are so many more women. So it's just an exciting time, and I'm really excited to see what the industry has for us.
Yeah, for sure. Now we're seeing the change and we're waiting to see the ripple effect that this will have in the future in the built environment. But thank you, Stephanie. I'm going to hop over to our next student that I would like to introduce, Catherine Fatua. So Catherine is currently enrolled for the bachelor's degree in construction and project management, obviously in the School of the Built Environment. And she is also currently working in industry in a firm. Oh, and she is also a very strong advocate for women in the built environment. And I would like to know more about this, Catherine. Why do you feel passionate about women in the built environment?
Hi everyone. So the reason why I feel passionate about women in construction is because I came from a background where my grandfathers were builders, my dad's a builder, all my uncles were builders. So growing up, all the men in my life were pretty much builders. And I would hear conversations about, you know, building and this method or this, you know, at the dinner table. That was just our normal talk. Sunday dinners, family barbecues, that was what we heard. So growing up, that was my interest. I never really had an interest in what, let's say, the women were talking about. I never had an interest in beauty as much as, let's say, what the men were talking. I found what the men were talking about was more interesting. But because growing up, I never saw a woman in the construction game, really. I always thought I wanted to be an architect in years 5, 6, 7, 8, because I never actually saw a female as a construction manager or a project manager. And sort of when I got to about year 7 or year 8, I went, this isn't actually what I want to do. I don't want to be an architect. I don't see myself as an architect. I see myself more as a project manager or a construction manager. What's stopping me from thinking I can't do that? So that was a bit of a wake-up call for me, because I realized the reason that I'm held back from doing what I want to do is because I don't know any females that are builders, construction managers, project managers, or anything in that sort of sector. And that's essentially why I decided to study construction and project management at UTS. There is definitely a strong presence in our degree of females now. I definitely feel very welcomed by everyone. There's definitely no gender gap or any sort of discrimination towards women in the course. I feel definitely comfortable with everyone in the course. There's definitely no problems. And I recently just got a job working for a company called Renaissance as a cadet, and the same thing there. I definitely feel comfortable. So I can see that there is a change towards women's role in the construction industry, which I'm proud of. And it's only going to get better. You know, the role women had 200 years ago to today, women weren't allowed to work back then. And you think how far we've even come from 40 or 50 years ago to now. So it's only going to keep changing for the better. And yeah, I think that's a really big thing. Yeah.
An exciting time to be part of this whole change and the energy going into the future. So it's a great time for women to step up. Thank you, Catherine. And then last but not least, Kimberly Tran. So Kimberly is also a second-year student enrolled for the bachelor's degree in construction project management. And Kimberly came from the textile industry as a production manager, where she worked for 8 years before decided to move into construction. So this is very interesting, Kimberly. And she also recently started her cadet experience at Richard Cruz Construction. So Kimberly, I think, yeah, the question would be from textile to construction, why and what's the experience?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the introduction, and thank you for joining us here. Initially, that's really a tough decision for me, moving from a long-term work experience going to a completely different field. But that's really influenced me in going to construction, because having that skills that you know that you have, but then other people will actually question you at some point, why construction? Women's there is very limited. Even you have skill, they have a lot of barrier that will not give you promotion in the end, but why still construction? But I think we should not limit ourselves really in leadership and what we can really achieve based on our agenda. And from that, I really take the leap to actually move to construction. And from now, I'm second year student. From my experience, I really enjoy it. And I really recently started as well my cadet experience. And from that experience, I really enjoyed the going to the project and what new experience that it can offer to me daily. And from that as well, in addition to Steph and Catherine said, the construction already started the lift to embrace more women in the industry. And that's really good opportunity for us to actually have equality in workplace and welcoming us to experience the broad opportunity that built environment can offer. Some of these opportunities is like progressive career growth and diversity of role that I think it can really, the construction can really bring the best out of you because you can really choose which field you want to. You can be an office based, you can mix field and office and bring out the character of yourself as well. And I guess a bonus is really highly rewarded job for new starters and for experienced individual as well. So I really hope more women to join the construction industry and empower more women's. And in the future, we can really lessen the barriers for women's. So I think that's
great to hear your experience. I might just now remind the attendees, if you have any questions, you are welcome to post it to us and we can read it out and answer if there's anything specific that you would like to know. But in the meantime, I would like to ask April to have you explain something more in detail for us. And it's that we understand that you are working on a gender equity policy for the Planning Institute of Australia. Now, this is very exciting. So maybe if you can just share a bit about the insights of PIA's role and what's happening, what are we about to see?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a really exciting thing. So planning is the only built environment profession that's association does not have a gender equity policy, and architecture has been really forward leading on this area. So there's an organization called Parla, who I do a lot of work for or work with on a lot of bits and pieces, who did some amazing research into gender equity in architecture. And I have to say that in terms of it's been a really tough sell, because in planning, the gender split, when you look at the pure numbers, is relatively equal. The issue is when you delve into there's two key things. One, there's no gender specific data. So we actually don't know. So it's you can't advocate for what you don't know. The other thing is to the point that we were talking a little bit about earlier, is that sort of progressive loss of women as you get into those more leadership and managerial kind of roles. And I think there's a variety of reasons. Like we all jump to, we lose a big cohort of women, particularly around when they start to have children and things like that. But it's not always that. It's we hear coming back and studying as well is another way. And I think it's important to make sure that we keep those women connected. I think for their own mental health and well-being, and that sense of connectedness to the profession, but we retain the that knowledge and that mentoring and that visibility. I think visibility is such a critical part. And so in planning, one of the things we're grappling with is about not only women in leadership roles, but also to women of colour. Indigenous women, there's a lot of a great Elle Davidson, who is fantastic, Indigenous woman, but she's almost like the go-to because we just don't have that diversity. And so what we want to do is for the gender equity policy is we really want to try and bring some of these issues to the fore. We want the planning profession to make a commitment, and I take Belinda's point. It's not just, I smiled when you said about the males of change. I completely agree with you. I think it's just, we just need people of change. We just need people to understand. It still plays into that very, slightly misogynist kind of thing of men champion of change. Like it's a really hard thing. So I think it's partly for us putting it on the table, making sure that we know it's an issue and that we're actually supporting young women to kind of come into the profession. So those of you on the call today, you know, we want young women to come in. We also want to help retain. And one of the big stats for me in the Planning Institute membership was that for those members over 65, only 20% are female.
Mm.
So we're losing this amazing kind of mentoring opportunities and that intergenerational kind of learning and those things, and being able to learn from each other. And I think that, you know, one of the great things is being in previous role and having middle-aged men critique the design of a skate park and can be, you know, sitting there talking about the aesthetics of the concrete not being as good as wood, but not. And so it's kind of like, it's those whole things about we need women to really be able to put that different lens. We need women of all ages in those genders. So what we're doing the policy for, it's a slow thing. It's something we're doing as a national approach. So I'm working with all the chairs of the other women in planning, and hopefully, you know, by next year we'll have a endorsed policy. So so Planning Institute website, if you want to learn about planning, jump on that. If you want to learn more about the gender equity, definitely jump on P's website.
Great, thank you, April. I see we've got one question that asked us to explain what is involved in planning. And I think before we just give a brief 1 or 2 sentences about what is planning, to just clarify that planning at UTS is a postgrad course. So there's various pathways into the postgraduate masters of planning. We also recently launched online masters in planning and an online masters in design, but that's postgrad. So if you're interested in that, please reach out and we'll give you information. In a nutshell, planning is, I think the most simplest way to explain it is basically architecture for the city. It's about, you know, designing what goes where. How does this whole picture fit into each other? How do we ensure livable cities, healthy cities? So it's a strategic approach to the built environment. April, do you have a better definition?
No, look, I think that's really great. I'd say planners are custodians of our cities and places. You know, we bring together all the players, have the conversations, including the community. Community is a really big player in this. We bring we're the generalists of the city. Really. And I think that what's really important, because I'm always shocked when students will ask me, there are two distinct sort of parts of planning. There's strategic planning, which is that forward thinking, and there's development assessment, both really important. Sometimes you're not suited to one or the other. I've been a strategic planner for, you know, the 20 odd years I've been working. I did half an hour in DA and it wasn't my thing. So both are really important. And so I think it's for people who are curious about cities, people who love cities, people who love stories. Storytelling is a big part of how do we reflect the stories, the aspirations of community into the physical form of the city. That's kind of for me.
Can I add to that if possible?
Yeah.
I also think it's also about creating legacy. I say that a lot about
100%.
to people who don't work in the building environment at all. And I try to explain to them what I do. And I'm technically not a planner, but because I manage, you know, rezonings and DAs and all that, you know, I'm often working a lot with planners and urban designers. And I'm actually teaching one of the courses of the online planning course and the online urban design course this semester. But to me, it's about legacy. It's about, you know, what is my contribution to the city, you know, for the future generations. And also it's about learning from the mistakes of the past and not repeating them, and thinking about how can we do it differently. And I think that's such a wonderful opportunity to be able to contribute to the city and to be able to contribute to others as well that engage in the city. So that, to me, I thought I'd add that, because for me it's beautiful. Legacy, and it's really special.
That's a very good summary, Belinda. I think we all work in legacy planning, legacy, you know, construction, project management. It's part of building our future. So on that note, I think we can close the session by all being confident in our profession, in the built environment, that there's ample opportunities, that it's a great future for any professional going into the built environment, but even more so for women in the built environment. There's ample opportunities and we need it. The future needs this voice in the built environment. But I thank you all for sharing just a short bit. I wish we could go on. We'll get UTS to do a webinar. I hope they're listening. I hope UTS are listening. So we can do a webinar, a weekly webinar, a women in the built environment. We'll be able to talk about that for ages. But thank you, everybody. And if there's any further questions, please reach out to us and to all my colleagues, female panel members today. Thank you so much. Keep on doing the wonderful work, and we'll see you in the built environment.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.